Hello, good day everyone. I am Mary Ann Harpilan and I am tasked to report about second and foreign language data by Gast and Selinker. Let us first define what is data analysis. When we say data analysis, it is a central part of understanding the field of SLA, which is gained by hands-on experience in data analysis and data interpretation. So, a given about SLA data is that there is often ambiguity with regard to interpretation. Thus, it is frequently the case that there are no correct answers in analyzing interlanguage data. And also, it focuses on the function of good argumentation is to lessen the ambiguity of analysis, and also in this part, or in this topic, data analysis, we present several data sets and provide a map through interlanguage analysis in a step-by-step fashion. So here is the data analysis. What does data analysis involve? First is it involves treating learners' language as if it were a new foreign language, examining carefully the writing or speech of second language learners, and trying to discover the patterns in their language. And lastly, data analysis involves not assuming that learners are using the same patterns as native speakers. Our first data analysis is data set 1, which is focused on plurals. So the data presented here were collected from 3 adult native speakers of Cairene Arabic, and they are intermediate to advanced speakers of English shortly after they had arrived in the United States. So the data source was compositions and conversations of that advanced speakers of English. So please take a look on that particular sentences and please observe the phrases which are set in boldface, and they are numbered 3:1 to 3:19. Please take note of the word 2 deserts, a couple of towel, how many ticket, many kind of way, the streets, the avenues, 4 days, a few months, its boundaries, a lot of mosquito, many people, ideas, 9 months, 100 years, 1.5 million inhabitants, how many months or years, many tents and goats. There are 2 mountains, how many hours, 200,000 telephone lines, and 3 or 4 kind of bread. So, in this part, we want the reader to describe the interlanguage pattern of plural usage in these utterances. So the first thing to focus on is the phrases set in boldface type. You need to categorize them according to English-like and non-English-like patterns. So decide if the choice is clear or not, remembering that data are often ambiguous. So the first thing to focus on is the phrases set in boldface type. So categorize them according to English-like or non-English-like patterns. So thus the first step is to make a list of sentences according to the criteria of English-like or non-English-like. So in here, we already classify and categorize the sentences based on its English-like or non-English-like pattern. So you can notice that in sentences 3:1, 3:5, 3:6, 3:8, 3:10, 3:12, and 3:15, 3:16, and 3:18. So the analysis of this phrase in boldface is clear. These sentences are English-like, or they are classified as English-like. Why? Why they are classified as English-like? Because they have an S plural marker on the noun. So that is why they are classified as English-like, which is focused on plurals. And you notice that in sentences 3:2, 3:3, 3:4, 3:7, 3:9, 3:11, 3:13, 3:14, 3:17, and 3:19, the analysis is also clear, but unlike the previous sentences, they are non-English-like. Why they are non-English-like? Because there is no plural marker on the noun, or as you can notice, there is no S, or there are no S in some nouns of that sentences. But also, you can notice that in sentence 3:14, it is somewhat also not clear because the phrase in boldface contains both a plural and a singular noun. So there is a choice in terms of analysis. So what one notices is that the form month as a conceptual plural is non-English-like, whereas the form years is English-like. That is, there is interlanguage variation within the same sentence. So, to sum it up, they are considered English-like sentences because they have S, which is a plural marker on the noun. And they are non-English-like because there is no plural marker on the noun. So the phrases in previous slides, which are set in boldface, contains both a plural and singular noun. So there is a choice in terms of analysis. And what one notices in that the form month as a conceptual plural is non-English-like, whereas the form years is English-like. And also, one analytical option is to say that when any element of the plural phrase is non-English-like, then the whole phrase is non-English-like. So here is an example of sample categorization of plurals in Arabic English interlanguage or Arabic English IL. So we consider here, they considered English like the two deserts, and in other part, which is the non-English like, a couple of towel. Because non-English like because there is no S in the word towel. So in this case, we see that there is interlanguage variation in the same sentence. This presents a case that is fundamentally different from the others in this data set. And also, another option is to create the third category, ambiguous, because placing target language categories on interlanguage data is potentially misleading in terms of creating general interlanguage rules for interlanguage data. Next data analysis is focused on data set 2, which is verb plus ing form of the verb markers. We then ask the questions, when do these learners add ing to verbs? And second, what else do they add to the base form of the verb? And lastly, our third question is, why do these learners sometimes add ing and sometimes use the base form of the verb? We have here an examples of verb plus ing form markers. Example, he is sleeping, or he's sleeping, she's sleeping, it's raining, the dog eating, or the dog is eating. 3:26, Honey watch TV, or Honey is watching TV. And 3:28, read the paper, or he is reading the paper. So you can notice here that learners are producing what in English would be represented by verb plus ing structures. So in this case, the intention involves progressive meaning. So the ing form denotes progressive meaning. And the third data analysis is data set 3, which is focused on prepositions. So the last data analysis set concerns prepositions. So examples of Arabic English sentence with preposition follow. So we have here at least 4 examples, which is numbered 330. You can find it from Morocco till Saudi Arabia. And 331, there is many kind of way you make baklawa. And 332, it's some kind of different. And 333, I don't like to buy a car from Ann Arbor. So you can notice that there's an arrow down, and that means that in that arrows are the intended English meanings of the sentences that you found in left side. So the intended English meanings of the sentence numbered 330 is from Morocco to Saudi Arabia. And instead of there is many kind of way you make baklawa, so there are many ways. There are many ways on making, or there are many ways to make baklawa. And the intended English meaning of it's some kind of different is it is quite different. And also, in the last sentence, the intended English meaning of the sentence I don't like to buy a car from Ann Arbor is I don't like to buy a car in Ann Arbor. So that is the prepositions. So in these examples, one noticeable factor in the use of prepositions by these learners is the different semantic areas involved, geographical versus temporal. So we need to emphasize that use the preposition from when someone is referring for geographical locations. And also remind learners, or we can realize that use no preposition except in specifically constrained instances. When we say a constrained instance was seen in the first set of sentence in which from was used in geographical phrases. So the example there is, you can find it from Morocco till Saudi Arabia. Okay. So 3.2. What does data analysis does not reveal? Or what does data analysis does not reveal? Here are some things to consider. What does data analysis does not reveal? In this part, our goal was to show that good argumentation can lessen the ambiguity inherent in most learner language data. So the analysis leaves us with questions that can lead to further study with the collection of a new data. When we say what does not reveal, the point here is that data should always be collected for a particular purpose, which often arises from the unanswered questions of previous analysis. So in this section, we again produce a step-by-step discussion that could lead to further empirical research. Thus, research is often produced by the question, what else is there that we want to know? So, what are the things that we need to know from the data? So here are some questions that focuses on what does data analysis does not reveal. First is the data spoken or written? Especially in analyzing data, we tend to focus on the data itself, and we tend to forget if the data is spoken or written. And also number 2, is the data from a single person or it is pooled? When we say, is the data from only one person or it is pooled, which means that it is from many people or it was collected from many people. And number 3, do the learners have the same L1? So when you are trying to analyze data, do the learners have the same L1? Or example, are they all Filipinos or they are mixed learners? They are not all Filipinos. Like for example, there are some certain respondents that are not really Filipino. And number 4, do the learners have the same proficiency in English or they do not have? And number 5, what is the linguistic environment of the form? So what are their linguistic environment? Do they speak English as a second language or they speak their L1? And number 6, how was the data elicited? And number 7, what was the social context? What was the social context when you analyze the data. And number 8, how often did the learner produce this form? So how often did the learner produce this form? So by answering that questions, what does data analysis does not reveal is, from that preceding analysis, one could raise the question of how to formulate descriptive interlanguage rules or principles, and whether with more relevant data or additional rules would be discovered. So in general, when we analyze data, either our own or data from the published literature, we want to always ask this question: what else do we want to find out that is not shown by the data presented? So we need to always ask this question: what else do we want to find out that is not shown by the data presented? So by asking that question, we can now turn to ways in which data can be collected. So let's proceed with data collection. 3.3 data collection, 3.3 data collection. And in this part, it presented that in recent years, there has been increased attention paid to data collection and analysis. This is the case since there has been increasing awareness that is most difficult to perfectly align the various elicitation tasks that are available, and the various ways one can analyze data with the underlying constructs one might wish to study. So there are numerous ways of eliciting second language data. As we mentioned earlier, many, but not all, have their origins in other disciplines. So this section is not intended to be inclusive. Rather, it is suggestive of the kinds of data and data elicitation methods that have been used in second language studies. So first is, we present two paradigms of data collection, which first is the qualitative paradigm and the second one is quantitative paradigm. So let us define, or let us point out some characteristics of qualitative paradigm. First is, it is from observation. So it can qualitative we can gain it from observation, and also it is subjective, and it is what we call insider perspective. And also qualitative paradigm is process oriented, it is holistic, and most of the time it is about case studies. And when we say quantitative paradigm, it is about experimentation, and it is objective, and it is outsider perspective, and also it is outcome oriented, and also it is particularistic and generalizable or generalizable. Also, another type of data collection is, we have the longitudinal studies and cross-sectional studies. So the first is we have the classroom data versus naturalistic data. When we say another form of data collection is we have the classroom data versus naturalistic data. And the second is one can think about two types of performance. It can be an actual speech sample or reactions to target language data. So the first are actual learner reproduction data. When we say actual learner production data, they are the classroom data and naturalistic data. When we say longitudinal studies or longitudinal data, there are four characteristics to be discussed since it focuses on the development of a few learners over a period of time. The four characteristics of longitudinal studies is first, the number of subjects and time frame of data collection. Second, amount of descriptive detail. Third is type of data. And lastly, we have the type of analysis. So, let's proceed with cross-sectional studies or cross-sectional data. It focuses on the learner's knowledge at a single point in time. In here, cross-sectional studies has also four identifiable characteristics that are generally associated with such studies. First is the number of subjects and time frame of data collection, and B, type of data, and C, descriptive detail, and D, analysis of data. So when we say analysis of data in longitudinal studies, this does not mean that the researcher does not set up a conversation to generate a particular type of data. It just simply means that longitudinal studies do not fit into the experimental paradigm of control group than experimental group, or counterbalancing and so forth. And also, analysis of data obtained through longitudinal studies and particularly in case studies. So, usually, longitudinal data are commonly present in case studies, and they are often in the form of descriptive, qualitative comments or narrative expositions, while quantification of data may not be the goal of such studies. The researcher may report the frequency of occurrence of some form. In cross-sectional studies or in cross-sectional study, it is generally consists of data gathered from a large number of subjects at a single point in time, or the data being that we are able to see a slice of development which is used to piece together actual development. Also, one advantage to a cross-sectional approach is the disadvantage of longitudinal data, given that there are large numbers of subjects in the former and it is more likely that the results can be generalized to a wider group. So let us now proceed with the data collection 3.3.1, eliciting speech samples, or how we elicit speech samples. So in this section, we discuss elicitation measures used for collecting information about learners' linguistic knowledge. So in particular, we consider ways of eliciting actual speech samples. So one wants actual speech samples within a specific context. So here are some ways of eliciting actual speech samples. First is the tape recorded advising sessions. Though it is not always feasible, but other ways of gathering naturalistic data must be employed. So that is why we need tape recorded advising sessions. And second is the narratives. Narratives can often be more complicated than one would think. So, for example, what does one say to make learners talk? So, sometimes you can force learners to talk directly. So that is why we need to let them do a narratives. So, we need to ask, what does one say to make learners talk? So, this may depend on the particular focus of the investigation. Another, for example, is if one wanted to determine a learner's ability to use past tense, a question such as the following could be used. Or you can use this so that learners can do narratives. You can ask this question, or you can instruct your learners to do this. Tell me or write about what you did last weekend. But however, if one wanted to learn about a learner's ability to express futurity, one could say, tell me or write about your plans for next week, or for next summer, or what are your plans for next year. And third is we have describe pictures. So we can elicit speech samples by letting the learners describe pictures. Or number 4 is retell a story. Or number 5, watch a silent film or film with minimum sound so that they are not influenced by the language used, and either retell it or give a play-by-play account. Excuse. And number 6 is we have elicited imitation, which allows a precise experimental design, usually including similar structure that vary along only one linguistic dimension. Thus, elicited imitation technique can be used to target a specific linguistic area. So as the term implies, this is a technique whereby a subject hears a sentence, often tape recorded, and then is asked to repeat it exactly. If the sentence is long enough, the subject will not be able to remember the sound and repeat it. It is therefore stored as a semantic unit, and the learner has to recreate the sentence using his or her knowledge of the second language. So this then gives the researcher an indication of the structure of the learner's grammar. So, there are 6 ways of eliciting actual speech samples. We have first, tape recorded advising sessions. Second, narratives. Third, describe pictures. Fourth, retell a story. Fifth, watch a silent film or film with minimum sound. And lastly, we have elicited imitation. So, data collection, eliciting reactions to data. But before we proceed with eliciting reactions to data, let us review about data can be analyzed quantitatively and qualitatively. So in the case of quantitative analysis, one can calculate the percentage of responses that match the target input and therefore obtain information about the extent to which learners perceive the structure in question. And in qualitative analysis, it provides an indication of a learner's developing grammar. So, data collection 3.3.2, eliciting reactions to data. Some data do not require learners to produce data, but to react in some way to data. Often, these responses are timed with the idea that speed of response is an indication of processing load. For example, one measures frequently used in sentence matching. One sentence will appear on a computer screen followed by a second sentence. The task is to identify if the sentences are the same or not. It has been found that identical grammatical sentences are responded to faster than identical ungrammatically sentences. So, by examining reaction time, one can determine whether a learner thinks a particular sentence is grammatical or not. And another type of reaction data is a decision task. When we say decision task, it is whereby a learner might be presented with a word and has to respond as to whether that string of letters or string of sounds is a word in the target language. So that is a decision task. You let the student respond as to whether that particular letters or string of sounds is a word in the target language. And another eliciting reaction to data is we have the intuitional data. When we say intuitional data, this refers to a type of metalinguistic performance. Learners are asked about their intuitions or judgments as to whether or not a given sentence is acceptable, either linguistically or in a particular context. For example, if this one is, learners of English might be given sentences like the following and asked whether they are good English sentences. So, here is the example. Learners of English might be given sentences and asked if they are good English sentences. We have only 2 examples. First is, he remembers the man who his brother is a doctor. In second sentence, we respect the man with whom you danced with him. So, we ask the English learners if that sentences are considered good English sentences. But grammatically judgments are one form of a metalinguistic performance or language objectification. Because intuitional data have been widely used in SLA research, yet more than other research methods, they have been the subject of controversy because along with this theoretical background have come methodologies typically used in linguistics. Methodologies for collecting linguistic data from native languages is that of grammaticality or acceptability, judgment test. So in that sentence samples, you have to ask the learners if that particular sentence is a good English sentence or not. Because grammaticality judgments are one but certainly not the only form of metalinguistic performance or language objectification. So in other words, one way of objectifying language is to state whether a given sentence is acceptable or not. And now let us proceed to data collection 3.3 verbal report data. When we say verbal reports as type, represent a type of introspective data. They are protocols or reports that come about from asking individuals to say what is going on in their minds as they are performing some tasks. So, verbal reports. And there are essentially two types of verbal reports that are used. First is we have the recalls, and second is the think aloud or the think alouds. When we say recalls can be done with some stimulus. Examples are video or audio of the event that a participant is reporting on, or a written paper that a learning has written, or without. So in the or we can also accommodate it if there is no stimulus to rely on, only on the individual's recollection of the event. And second is the think aloud. Think aloud involves reporting on the event as it is occurring. The intent is to understand the thought processes of a learner as he or she is doing a task. So, that are some two verbal reports. Think aloud involves reporting on the event as it is occurring. The intent is to understand the thought processes of a learner as he or she is doing a task. For example of this is allowing a learner to describe a particular scene that is present. So that is an example of think aloud. And we have here the data collection measuring non-linguistic information. How are we going to measure non-linguistic information? Studies investigating attitude, motivation, learning styles, and personality characteristics frequently use instruments borrowed directly or with some modification from the field of psychology. We can use this as a non-linguistic informations, or there are only three. First is we have the questionnaires. Questionnaires are commonly used to gain information about attitudes a learner may have towards language learning, or either generally toward the learning of a specific language. So, that is a form of measuring non-linguistic information. And number 2 is we have the interviews. Interviews are generally conducted orally and one-on-one. They can either have fixed questions or they can be less structured, allowing the interviewer to tailor the questions according to the responses of the interviewee. So, in this measuring non-linguistic information, in studies of the sort, researchers often used a standardized test of language proficiency against which to measure the attribute under investigation. And we have the third is diary as measuring non-linguistic information, because diaries are journals that a learner keeps either on his or her own initiative or following a request or assignment given by a teacher. So diaries are often a good source of information about attitudes and motivations, and also it provides a more open-ended forum for such information without the constraints of specific questions. So that are the three data collection involving measuring non-linguistic information: the questionnaires, interviews, and diaries. And we have the data collection 3.3.5, measuring general proficiency standardized language tests. Standardized language tests are not often used as a source for second language data, primarily because the most common type of standardized test is objective and does not yield productive data that can be easily analyzed. And there are 4 common ways of assessing proficiency by Thomas in 1994 as a tool in measuring general proficiency standardized language test. The first way is impressionistic judgment. Impressionistic judgment followed by institutional status. Example of institutional status is first semester of second year French. So institutional status. Letter C is specific research design test. And lastly, he presented the standardized test. And we have the 3.4 replication. Is it possible that we can replicate a research or a study? So according to American Psychological Association in 1994, in page 2, it states that the essence of the scientific method involves observations that can be repeated and verified by others. So that is replication. So much of second language acquisition research is empirical, and such research is in need of replication because second language acquisition research, it deals with human behavior and thus is often inconsistent because of the 2 factors. Sometimes it is inconsistent because of these 2 factors. First is the paucity of participants in many studies. And second is the nature of second language knowledge. So as mentioned earlier, the replication refers to the fact that there are certain aspects of the second language that learners are uncertain of. So this may be because these are areas of language that they are working on and about which they do not have definite knowledge. So that is why there is a need for replication. Another, as Polio and Gass in 1997 have argued about replication or for the importance of replication and at the same time acknowledging exact replication is impossible given that a replication study includes different individuals. Because when you say replication studies are an ideal way for those who are new to the field to get their hands dirty with actual data. (3.5) presents issues in data analysis. Here are some issues in data analysis. The first issue is the determination of development. Because there is no easy way of determining whether a given learner is more or less proficient than another. And also in the field of second language acquisition has not yet come up with an index of development. So that is the first issue in analyzing data. That is, unlike in child language acquisition research, which is heavily reliant on the link of utterance. So, in this first issue, there is no easy way of determining whether a given learner is more proficient or less proficient than another. Thus, one cannot determine where on a development scale is a given individual can be placed. And also, this is partly because of the nature of second language learning. Because learners do not have a uniform starting point. From the beginning, their utterances vary in the degree of syntactic sophistication, and furthermore, interlanguages are unique creations. While there may be similarities among speakers of a given native language learning the same target language, and while there may be similarities across target language, each individual creates his or her own language system. And the second issue in data analysis is that data do not yield unique results. Because how do we measure L2 development? Or does interlanguage development mean moving toward a target language L2? Or in analyzing interlanguage, do we count errors of overgeneralization? And now let's proceed with acquisition. What is acquisition in data analysis? How one defines acquisition depends on what one is looking at. This might range from linguistic knowledge to ability to use that knowledge in speech and the ability to process language in real time. So, various definitions of language of a form are possible. Because when we say acquisition, it is not just the point at which something is acquired that is of interest, but it is also important to consider the stages that a learner goes through in acquiring a particular form. So that ends my report about second and foreign language data. Thank you and keep safe always. God bless.